This special presentation is made possible by the members of Channel 48.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Clooney. It seems just like yesterday, doesn't it? When we were on our way to cheer our heroes in red at Crosley Field. When a day of pure magic at Coney Island began with a ride aboard the Island Queen. When we were getting on board a train at Union Terminal bound for exotic adventure. Or when the entire family would hop on a streetcar to marvel at the sparkling sights of downtown Cincinnati, all dressed up for Christmas. Now, it was a special era indeed, a time that had its own rhythm, cadence. And when it was over, it would never be again, except in our memories, except in our Cincinnati reflections. Do you remember when you went to Union Terminal for the very first time? Perhaps it was to take a train ride yourself to an exotic location like Chicago or Chattanooga or Winton Place. Or it might have been when you went to greet a visiting friend or relative just arriving in town. But regardless of when it was, you surely recall your first visit to Union Terminal. After all, when Union Terminal opened for business in 1933, it was, as many people called it, America's most beautiful train station. While it's true that there were those who didn't quite share that opinion, some even referred to it as a colossal mistake, it was quite a sight to behold. It was the largest half-dome ever constructed in the world. But Union Terminal played a pivotal role in both our collective and personal histories, as it was the place that could simultaneously evoke feelings of adventure, romance, excitement, wonder, and anxious uncertainty as we saw our boys off to war in the early 1940s. It is a piece of our shared past worth remembering. The need for a central train terminal in Cincinnati was discussed as early as the 1890s, when civic leaders realized that with rail stations scattered through the city, train travel in Cincinnati was a model of inefficiency. But getting all the railroads together, raising the essential capital between them, $41 million, and deciding where to put it, Lincoln Park, would take nearly 30 years. Ground was finally broken in 1929, just months before the stock market crash. And over the next 4 years, Cincinnati's Union Terminal took shape. When it was finished, the complex covered 287 acres, including 94 miles of track. The Art Deco interior, the 22 large and small buildings that comprised the terminal, were finished with the finest materials, imported marble, genuine leather seating, fine woods from around the world. There was a gift shop, a barber shop, drugstore, newsstand, bank, toy store, bookstore, restaurant, garage, and even a service station. It was a grand place indeed. From the imposing rotunda to the massive passenger concourse, the terminal could accommodate over 200 trains and 17,000 people per day. From the time it was officially dedicated in March of 1933, it was an immediate public and architectural success. People came from miles around to marvel at its magnificence. The mosaic tile murals, created as a tribute to Ohio Valley Industries and the people who were the life force, were superbly crafted.
It was Well, it was just so fantastic with the beautiful murals that they had. And it was, to me, it was like, well, a wonderful, wonderful museum. And always loved trains, and my husband did too. And it was just great.
Union Terminal became an instant symbol of the city. After all, it was the glamorous era of train travel. And Union Terminal, in all its Art Deco finery, was a monument to its glory and romance.
Millions and millions of people pass through CUT each year. It was probably the focal place of Cincinnati. And just to think of the entrepreneurs that came to Cincinnati and made their fortunes here and made Cincinnati what it is.
Indeed, Cincinnati had a love affair with Union Terminal, but it was a love affair that wouldn't last. The almost simultaneous surge of passenger car production and the novelty of airplane travel caused the sale of train tickets at Union Terminal to decline after only 1 year. It was a trend that would continue until the start of World War II.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
With striking suddenness, the United States was plunged into the Second World War. As American troops prepared to fight the war raging overseas, Union Terminal was poised to play a pivotal role in the disbursement of trains bearing men and machinery to all parts of the country. The start of World War II marked the beginning of Union Terminal's glory days. Suddenly, 465 trains were moving out of the terminal every day, well beyond the stated and planned capacity. Continuous crowds of people flooded into the terminal day and night. 65 agents staffed ticket windows that never closed. Empty chairs were hard to come by, forcing thousands to sleep on newspapers each night. From their point of embarkation at Cincinnati's Union Terminal, Cincinnati's young soldiers said goodbye to the warm embrace of home and went off to fight the war in the Pacific Islands, Europe, North Africa, and Asia.
We would go to just see the soldiers, see the people coming in on the trains. There was something exciting about it because, you see, then it was a patriotic era. Everybody felt good about the men in uniforms. As a little kid, next to school teachers, I just thought those guys ran the world.
And you'd stand there, of course I was just a kid, and you'd stand there and you'd see the soldiers and the sailors and the Marines come back, and of course that was a happy occasion, and there'd be tears of joy, and then the ones going the other way would be tears of sadness, because you just didn't know if you left them, your brother and sweetheart and sons, you didn't know whether they were going to come back or not.
It was exciting, and then it was very sad, because some of them were coming back totally different than when they left. It was just really, it could be a happy time, and then it was a very sad time.
One of those happy times belonged to Virginia Shearing, who will never forget the day her brother came home on a 30-day leave. The family met him outside on the front lawn of Union Terminal.
He didn't want to be inside with the crowd. He told us exactly where to be, and that's where we stood. We knew when he was due in, and we waited. And we saw him come walking down the sidewalk. It was incredible. Thankful that he was all in one piece. I don't think you'll ever forget that feeling. We felt that we were very lucky that God had taken care of him, and we were just very grateful that he was back with us.
As the passenger trains, prison trains, and hospital trains continued to roll out of Union Terminal, The longing to bring the boys home grew stronger with every passing day. People stayed close to their radios to receive the latest news of the war on the nation station, WLW. At movie theaters, newsreels brought home vivid pictures of the front. Local papers revealed the grim toll the war would take at home. But then came the news the world was waiting to hear.
You've heard it, ladies and gentlemen, and we're here in the Time Star newsroom with a traveling microphone. The war is over. President Harry Truman has announced the end of the war. There it is, the news you've been waiting for. It's over, all over. The fighting has ended. Johnny will come marching home.
A stream of jubilant reunions began to fill Union Terminal as Cincinnati's brave men and women returned home at last.
I remember coming down right at the end of World War II. And I could remember, all I could see was legs and knees, you know, and the crowd just kind of overwhelmed me because I was a farm boy and not used to crowds like that. And I still remember looking up at the big sign. Now, I could not be accurate on this, but I think it said, "Welcome home, Yanks." And that always left an impression with me.
The end of the war marked the beginning of the decline of Union Terminal's glory days. Still, train whistles sounded even through the rising din of highway traffic and roaring planes. Some of those trains brought important people into the Queen City.
My most vivid memory of Union Terminal is going down to see President Truman right after he was reelected and won over Dewey. And it was at midnight. My father woke my twin sister and I up and said, "You want to go see the president?" And we went down and went all the way down to the tracks. And he was on the back of a train, and it was dark, and there weren't that many people there because people didn't know he was coming through, I guess.
But even as the number of passenger trains diminished, the love that many Cincinnatians had for the venerable terminal did not.
Most of its ambiance is contained in that rotunda area where the light filters through the windows, the way it hits that marble floor and hits those murals. People, upon seeing that building the first time, even today, pull their car off to the road, try and find some way to get up to it and photograph it. You don't see that for very many buildings.
No, indeed. But in the early 70s, when Union Terminal was servicing only 4 routes, it was clear the end was coming. The last passenger train pulled out of Union Terminal on October 28, 1972. It was bound for Washington, D.C.
The train was in there for about a half an hour or so while they serviced it and unloaded baggage and loaded baggage, and then the train departed. And we all sort of milled around a little bit, and something unique, I think, happened. I went in a door I wasn't supposed to go in, and I heard singing, and I heard talking. And I went in this little room, and here were, I guess, maybe 10, 15 people. And they were standing around a cake and getting ready to cut it. And they said, "Come on in." So I came in, I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, we are the last employees of Cincinnati Union Terminal. We're having a little party. Would you come in and be a part of it?" I said, "Sure." I stayed there for a few minutes and went upstairs, and then in the rotunda, the music, Auld Lang Syne, just came out through the whole concourse. And I didn't know where it was coming from, so finally it dawned on me. It was coming from the little theater. And here were 2 people, one sitting at the organ, and the other one just leaning up against the organ, watching the keys as the organist was playing Auld Lang Syne for the last time in Cincinnati Union Terminal. Sort of a fitting end to CUT.
Today, Cincinnati Union Terminal is home to the Cincinnati Museum Center, the Children's Museum, and the Cincinnati Historical Society. And while some Amtrak passenger trains are scheduled in and out of Union Terminal even today, if you stand very still in the rotunda, you might just hear echoes of its brief but illustrious past, still ringing through its fabled corridors. If you grew up in Cincinnati before 1971, it is a pretty good bet that you spent some memorable summer days and nights at old Coney Island. Whether you traveled there by automobile or by water aboard the legendary Island Queen, it is not likely that you could ever forget the thrills of riding the Wildcat or gliding with your sweetheart through the Cascades, or dancing the night away to the music of the big bands at Moonlight Gardens. Those blessed days. In retrospect, they seemed to many of us a time of unbridled joy. They were often subject, however, to the whims of the river, which without any warning could gather up its fury and spoil the dreams of a day spent at Coney Island. Let's remember it all together. On a shady bank of the Ohio River in the mid-1800s, James Parker's small apple orchard grew in a grove of magnificent beauty. Over the years, as the idyllic setting drew flocks of outdoor revelers and picnickers, Parker realized that renting the orchard would be far more profitable than growing apples. So in the 1870s, Ohio Grove was built, and it became a haven for outdoor amusement in the spring and summer. At first, there was bowling, a dance platform, and plenty of places to picnic. As more amusements were added, Ohio Grove became known as the Coney Island of the West. And then simply as Coney Island. Through several ownership changes and park expansion, Coney Island retained its first-class approach to providing patrons with an outstanding recreational experience. By the 1920s, under the leadership of George Schott, the enterprise grew into one of the finest parks of its kind in the country.
My grandfather started the world's largest recirculating swimming pool, which is still there today and still operating, and a marvel in its own right. 200 by 400 feet, 2.5 million gallons of water.
Of course, that's Sunlight Pool. Since 1925, Cincinnati's favorite place to cool off in the summertime. In 1926, the famed Wildcat ride debuted, and what an amazing thrill it provided in its time. The Cascades ride was added in 1928 to the delight of lovers everywhere. There was the grand Ferris wheel, the Zoomer, the Old Mill Chute ride, and Twister, the tunneled roller coaster.
There was a ride in the 20s called the Jack and Jill ride, and it was a slide, a wooden slide. And people would go down there, and I understand from my father that my mother went down there as a young girl, and she got some splinters in her posterior. And when her father, George, Schott heard that, the ride was closed the next day, torn down and out of there.
Stepping into Devil's Kitchen was a disorienting challenge on a hot summer day. Along with all the rides, visitors could climb into a paddle boat on Lake Como, Coney Island's own waterway, carved out of a cornfield in 1893.
It was a beautiful park. The landscaping, the rides, the people that worked there, the personnel, the setting on the river, beautiful, beautiful setting, excellently maintained, just very well maintained.
I have visited most of the major amusement parks of that era, and I really can proudly say that Coney Island was the finest amusement park in the United States. And I think it had that reputation, and well-deserved.
But let me tell you, Coney Island was more than rides and swimming and picnicking. At the end of the day at Coney Island, there was music, emanating from a place where many a romance was kindled, Moonlight Gardens. It was at Moonlight Gardens where many national and international stars came to entertain. And then there were Moonlight Gardens' resident band leaders and star performers, Charlie Carey, Clyde Trask, and Jimmy James. Judy James remembers singing with her dad's band at Moonlight Gardens.
I started singing with him 2 days before my 18th birthday. And I remember singing, and at the back of the hall was a balcony. And they had private rooms up there where you could have private parties, and people could lean over the balcony. And as you're singing or performing, and you're looking straight out to the end of the room, and you just kind of look up there, and people are kind of leaning over the balcony and watching you and listening to you. It was open, and it was romantic, and it was clean, and everything smelled good, and out, in between sets, you could walk out into the park and sit in this beautiful, clean place. And the romance, I think, probably was the big thing. Plus the fact they had wonderful bands performing there. I mean, real orchestras.
I lived through the big band era, and we'd go up to Moonlight and just stand in front of the bandstand enthralled, listening to Dorsey, Sinatra would show up, all the great talent, Pete Fountain, Al Hurt, and very reasonably priced. I can't ever remember paying more than $3 to get in Moonlight Gardens.
When I got in high school, Moonlight Gardens was such a big deal, and we'd go dating on Saturday night, Friday night. I was lucky. A couple different dates, go a couple times in a row. But that was the best thing to do all through the summer, is go up to Moonlight Gardens.
And then you look forward to going up and dancing with, as you got older, dancing with somebody your own age. And the soldiers would be there, and the sailors and the Marines. And it was really exciting.
That's where I got proposed to, was at Moonlight Gardens. He had gone into the service, and this was 1948, and he had gotten out, and he said, "Would you like to get married?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I got plans on getting married. I'm glad you asked me." So we did. Yeah, we did. It was, being under there underneath the stars. I don't know if there's any place like that today, but it was wonderful then.
It seemed as though nothing could disturb the reverie that was Moonlight Gardens and Coney Island. Nothing except Mother Nature. Being located on the banks of the Ohio River meant there was always the threat of flooding. There were many times when workers found themselves scurrying to tie rides down or move animals to higher ground. Through the years, Coney Island suffered many floods. But no single flood was more devastating to Coney Island, the city, and to the Ohio River Valley than the Great Flood of 1937, a flood that came to be known as the worst in Cincinnati history. When it was over, it was unclear how the city, including its beloved Coney Island, could ever recover from the overwhelming devastation. But recover it did, and by May of that year, 1937, the crowds returned. Coney Island was such a popular leisure time destination that 19 steamboats were used to transport people to the park. But without a doubt, the Island Queen was the most popular of them all. She was a grand lady, pressed into service in 1925. In her beautiful ballroom, gaiety and romance could begin even before landing at the park.
The Island Queen to a child was so huge and so magical. You would just run from deck to deck to deck, up and look all around, and just, it was another thing, an entirely another thing. It just was wonderful. And then the fun part about that was that you knew that when you got off there, you were going to have more fun that day.
Every Sunday, my father had to ride the Island Queen back and forth to Coney Island. That was part of his job. The Island Queen literally held as many as 4,000 people. And with that many people, there had to be management on the Queen. So often I would go up there with him, and I would run around as a little kid and play the games. I thought it was wonderful. And we played skee ball and went up and down the river. And I remember the dance floor, how people danced in the afternoon. It was the world's largest floating dance floor.
The Island Queen was synonymous with the coming of spring, and when she awakened, so did the promise of another season of celebration at Coney Island. The Island Queen was as much a part of the Coney Island experience as the park itself. But then, on September 9, 1947, while docked in Pittsburgh, the spark from a welder's torch set the Island Queen ablaze. Soon, she was gone. And when she died, Cincinnati lost a piece of her own soul, leaving a void that could never be filled.
We had a ride on there about a week before this happened, and we felt really bad. I thought it was the end of the world because, you know, Coney Island with the Island Queen just wasn't the same.
My thoughts were they would rebuild it. Those were my thoughts. I mean, how could you ever let the Island Queen go? Or that part of getting to Coney Island on the Island Queen. I just took for granted that it would be rebuilt. I never dreamed that there would never be another boat to take you to Coney Island. That was all part of it. That was all part of it.
With the death of the Island Queen, more and more people began driving to Coney Island, and Coney's managers continued to make improvements to the park season after season. More rides were added, like the Lost River. And the Shooting Star.
The Shooting Star was like a floating out and back coaster, and you race out and race back. And that was an extremely popular ride. We had an old ride called a Tumblebug. And that was very popular, and that went over and up and down on a steel track, and everybody sat in a tub-like affair. And for an inexpensive ride, that was extremely popular.
Soon there was a sky ride, trains, and a modernized log flume. Kittyland was built, along with the Land of Oz.
Our vacation was Coney Island. My dad would take us vacation, and the one day was go to the zoo, and the next day would go to Coney Island. And we went for the day and night. We stayed all day and all night, and would ride the Wildcat and the Shooting Star all day long.
I love the whip. I love the whip because you go so far and go around real fast and it would tickle your belly. I couldn't wait for it to go around and get around again, yeah.
There were also free shows for patrons to enjoy. There was a Western Review, a porpoise and ski show, and always plenty of fireworks.
We used to have an act in the fall show, and this fellow's name was Suicide Simon. And every day at 4 and 10 o'clock, he'd climb in this box with 2 sticks of dynamite, and he'd blow himself up. And the crowd thought that was absolutely wonderful. But for those of us who used to work there, at 4 o'clock, I'd be at my desk doing something, not paying any of these shows go on, and I've seen them. And inevitably, at 4 o'clock, I'm writing at my desk, and this huge explosion goes off in the park. My pen goes this way, something goes that way, and no one ever got used to that explosion.
In the late 1960s, when the thought of managing another flood became too much to bear, Coney Island was purchased by Taft Broadcasting Company, who planned to build a theme park north of the city.
Life goes on. You can't live in the past, and they're wonderful memories, but you know they can't come back, and maybe they shouldn't come back. They wouldn't fit the era of today.
Coney Island closed as an amusement park in 1971, though today it is what it was when James Parker opened the gates to Ohio Grove back in the 1870s. A magnificent place to picnic, to stroll, to swim, and to enjoy the rare beauty of life along the banks of the Ohio River. Think back, if you will, to the Cincinnati summers of your youth. For many of us, some of the most memorable moments of our shared past were spent in a plain, utilitarian, I suppose quite unremarkable baseball park, a beloved place called Crosley Field. The history of Crosley Field dates back to 1884 when Baseball Club Park, a modest structure, was built on the site of an abandoned brickyard at the corner of Findlay and Western. In 1911, Redland Field rose out of what had been called the Palace of the Fans, and the larger, more modernized park was ready for the start of the 1912 season. The Cincinnati Reds played at Redland Field until 1934. That was when entrepreneur Powell Crosley Jr. bought the team and renamed the park. The Crosley Field era had begun, and it would be filled with memorable milestones, some more pleasant to recall than others. Baseball's first night game was played on May 24, 1935, amid the scorn of skeptics who called it impractical and even dangerous. In 1937, when the waters of the Great Flood washed over Crosley Field, groundskeeper Matty Schwab and pitcher Lee Grissom rode into the park over the center field wall. Johnny Vandermeer pitched the first of 2 consecutive no-hitters at Crosley Field in 1938. There was a pennant win for the Reds in 1939 and a world championship in 1940. Crosley Field. What was it about this no-frills ball yard with its hard seats and brick and smokestack surroundings that inspired in every one of us such genuine fondness then, the kind of longing now?
Crosley Field was the ultimate working man's ballpark. It was in a working-class neighborhood. The architecture, construction of it was, intentional or not, exactly fitting with the neighborhood, with the houses, with the other factories. It was a factory ballpark, and that was the beautiful thing about it. It did not stand out of place at all. It was as much a part of the neighborhood as anything else you could find there, and that was the beauty of Crosley Field.
Indeed, often it was difficult to tell where Crosley Field ended and the neighborhood began. Its familiar landmarks were the factory buildings themselves and the signs that advertised local attractions and businesses.
Well, my uncle's company, Lackner Sign Company, used to be right across York Street and looked over the bleachers. And Dad would go down and work on the weekends, and we would go down, sit on the fire escape or in the window, listen to the radio, and watch the ball game over the bleachers. So we get to watch it. We got to go a lot that way.
So familiar did the sights and sounds of Crosley Field become to its fans that even if you were at home listening to the game on the radio, you knew that if the announcer said the ball had been hit to the laundry, then it was likely that a happy batter was circling the bases. And in the background, as the comforting strains of Ronnie Dale's lively organ music filled the airwaves, you felt as though you were among the fans at Crosley during the fading dusk of a remarkable summer evening.
As Hart took a shot at that, drove it into deep.
That it was a fans' ballpark is something that local architect Harry Hake obviously had in mind when he prepared the plans for Redland Field in 1910. It was a feeling that transcended the generations.
The magical thing for me was that you were close to it. I mean, you could actually see Jim O'Toole warming up in the bullpen, or Frank Robinson shagging flies in the outfield, or Veda Pinson stretching. You were right there with them. It was like you were participating in the game with them. And that was the best part of it, is that when you went to a Reds game at Crosley Field, you were actually part of the whole experience. And you had that closeness with them that you knew at any time you could hear them talking or shouting or spitting tobacco juice or whatever, and they could hear you too. So it was that closeness that really made it fun.
I enjoyed pitching at Crosley Field because the fans were right on top of you. You know, I mean, it was neat because you knew everybody in the first row, and it made you work that much harder. And when the other teams came in, they'd look at those balls and they didn't want to pitch because it was like pitching at Wrigley Field today. The ball jumps out pretty fast, and but being a hometown boy and pitching there every day, it's to your advantage.
To get up to the dressing room, the Reds' dressing room was up in the front of the stadium. So before and after the game, the players went right through the group of fans and shook hands with about half of them on the way up to the dressing room after a game, especially a winner. But it was a friendly park, and people knew each other. The fans knew each other. They knew all the help around there. There were real great comradeship among fans, players, and everybody, even the umpires.
There were places where you could have access to the players if kids wanted to get autographs. And it was just a whole new atmosphere because now it's so far away. And I think one of the players said that they miss it because they said you can't hear the crowd noise.
We'd sit down in the bullpen when I'd warm up, and kids would flock down there, and the ushers weren't pushing, hey, you can't go back there. We'd say, hey, let them come. We'd give them a ball because then we'd send them to get a sandwich or something, you know. You bring me a hot dog, I'll give you a ball, you know. So, I mean, we had a great relationship with all the fans in Cincinnati. I don't think I ever got booed at Cincinnati. I can't remember ever, you know, because we just, I mean, I always signed autographs. I shook everybody's hand that I could. You know, I knew everybody in all the different box seats, you know, by their first name. I knew their kids' names.
The first thing that always hit me was the smell. First, it was the smell coming into Cincinnati, because you'd smell Procter & Gamble and that really acrid soap smell. And then by the time you got to the ballpark and got out of the bus, you smelled the cigars and the beer and the popcorn and and the peanuts. It just all hit you at once. And that's the first memory of Crosley Field, was the smell of the neighborhood. And then you get in there, and at that time it was painted white for the most part. And you get in there and you see that white and the green of the field and the players warming up, and it was just an amazing moment.
We'd get down there. We didn't have much money, but about once a year, my brother and I, he was 3 years older, we'd get down to Crosley Field, and for 50 cents you could get a seat out in the, well, they call it the sun deck, and then later on they called it the moon deck at night after they installed lights in 1935. And the ushers would let you go from one section to another. They'd let you go from there to the reserved red seats, and then from those they'd go to the box seats. And by the third or fourth inning, for 50 cents, you could have yourself a box seat. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, box seat for 50 cents, and why not? Take a look at this. Red Hots, 30 cents. You could get a hamburger, and it was a big one for 50 cents. The beer, 35 cents. Want a soft drink? 15, or the big one for 25. Same thing with the coffee, 15, 25 cents. And the fans just kept on coming. In 1939, an upper deck was added to the grandstand pavilions, and the infamous Goat Run seating was installed in right field. That was in 1946 to accommodate and encourage larger crowds. In 1957, the famous 5-story scoreboard went up in the outfield. And so, throughout the Crosley Field era, the fans came to hail their heroes in red. Ewell, the Whip Blackwell, Johnny Vandermeer, Ernie Lombardi, the Schnoz, Veda Pinson, Jim O'Toole, Joey J., Leo Cardenas, Nux, Joe Nuxall, Gordy Coleman, Fred Hutchinson, Gus Bell, Frank McCormick, Jim Maloney, Paul Derringer, Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, and many more. And as the Crosley Field era played on, it was chronicled for us by perhaps the greatest baseball storyteller of all time, the inimitable Wade Hoyt, the voice of the Reds from 1942 to 1965.
And he hit the ball now on the ground to the third baseman, Boyer. Boyer grabbed it, made the play at first, and Chacon is out at first.
Through his engaging tales, often told during long and sometimes hoped-for rain delays, we were transported to the world of baseball heroes and the legends they inspired.
And it just occurred to me, believe it or not, that I played here myself. And I had forgotten all about it. I was here with the Athletics the second half of the season in '31 and pitched right here in the World Series and got beaten.
Well, I never took a radio to the game because I always wanted to hear what was going on at the game, whether it was something in the field or in the stands, because when you're a kid, too, and you don't see too many games, you're looking around constantly to see what's going on around you. And as things happened on the field, you could almost hear Wade Hoyt's voice in your head, even if you didn't have a radio. You knew what was being called.
Remember the special promotional games at Crosley Field? They were always a big hit with fans and players alike. There was Shriners Night, there was Ladies Night, a Bat Day, knothole games, especially popular with the kids.
Chamber of Commerce had a night there. It was a big night, and the players would go out and shake hands. When a whistle blew, they'd go out and shake hands through the stands and bleachers and everything with the fans. And if you happened to be shaking hands with a fan at a certain time the whistle blew, well, you brought him in and he got a prize and at home plate. And the guys loved that, and fans loved it.
But there was change in the wind. As early as the late 1950s, talk of building a new stadium began to be heard around town. The rise in popularity of the automobile over public transportation caused massive traffic problems on the narrow neighborhood streets around Crosley Field. Soon, familiar buildings and landmarks disappeared as city planners tried to ease the parking problems around Crosley.
Sometimes if you park too close, there'd be somebody parked behind you, and if you wanted to leave early, you couldn't get out. So a lot of us would park at the Union Terminal. And so they'd have these kids, 7, 8 years old, run up there and say, "Hey, mister, give me a quarter and I'll watch your car." Well, the inference was that if you don't give me a quarter, I won't watch your car, and something might happen to it.
Initially, there was talk about renovating Crosley Field, but eventually, it was decided that a new stadium would be built on the riverfront. The last game at Crosley Field was played on the night of June 24th, 1970.
And we went back in the office, and I'll tell you, it might have been a few tears. Really, it affected us, really. And I know that it affected some of the players that had been there a while, because they hated, you see, they hesitated to leave the field. They looked like they wanted to stay out there and stay on the field.
After the final out, the grounds crew presented Crosley's home plate to Mayor Gene Ruhlman, who then climbed aboard a helicopter and took the plate the 1.5 miles to Riverfront Stadium. 2 years later, on April 19, 1972, the wrecking ball came.
Everybody knew about it. The whole country knew about it. And there was a lot of people, there was a lot of tears shed about it. A lot of people felt that they never should have left there. Yet some people thought that, you know, going to the new field was so much better. So mixed emotions. We had one of our wrecking balls, we had it painted white and put a red leg on the outside of it, and to smash the bleachers and to wreck the different concrete parts of the ball field down. In fact, Pete Rose and Pete Rose Jr. were there the day we wrecked it. We put Pete Rose Jr. in the crane, and he sat on the operator's lap, and he was the first one to swing at the Crosley Field. We had some dignitaries down from City Hall, but Pete Rose Jr. was the first one to do any wrecking down there. We had received many, many calls from all over the country. People wanted to buy different items from the place, the signs, the scoreboard signs. People wanted to buy dirt from the infield, dirt from the outfield. We probably had 3 or 4 salesmen just running around trying to take care of the hundreds of people who were there daily coming in to buy different material from us. It was quite interesting.
And so the Crosley Field era ended after 4,543 games. Today, Crosley Field has been resurrected in blue ash and appears much as it did the night of June 24th, 1970.
Every time we play or I put the uniform on to play in an Old Timers game, those memories seem to come back, especially when you're talking to guys that you played with in these Old Timers games. And now that we rebuilt Crosley Field out in Blue Ash, the memories come back a lot quicker when we're out there every year.
But as we look ahead to the next generation of baseball in yet another new stadium, should we, could we, ever go back again?
You can create a place that has natural grass so you can smell it again. And you can create a place where the seats are angled so that they're closer to the action and you're not too far away to even see the faces. That's the kind of thing you can do, but I think it's dangerous to ever try and recreate something that only exists in your mind now. It's better to let the memories be what they are.
In the days before strip shopping centers and suburban malls, there were fewer places to shop in Cincinnati. There were the corners, of course, like People's Corner, but most important of all was downtown. A shopping trip downtown was anything but ordinary. Each excursion held the promise of adventure, romance, and surprise. Downtown Cincinnati was pure magic any time of year, but at Christmas time, well, the Queen City simply sparkled in all of her festive finery. It's no wonder that the memories she inspired are as vivid today as they were when they were created all those Christmases ago.
It was just a magical time of the year. It really, really gave you the Christmas spirit. All the downtown stores, the decorations, all magnificent. The window displays, everything just just was wonderful. And my children always were in awe from the time they were little, you know, until they grew up, and all of it just seemed to go away. So exciting. And what my children and I always did was go over to Cincinnati the day after Thanksgiving, like so many people did, go to see the trains. And then we'd head up to Shelito's, to Toyland, and to see the decorations and to go into Toyland. And there, my children could purchase their own presents. There was a place that just set up for children, and they had their own money, and they would go in and buy presents for whoever they wanted to buy for. All my children like Santa. There's a picture of my little girl where she just is looking at him, and then my two boys, and I got a picture of them where they're looking at Santa. I know that my oldest boy, really, I think he knew about Santa, but I still would say that he was in awe that day of him, even though he knew that he wasn't for real.
You could travel, go any place in the downtown area, and the stores were just beautifully decorated and the merchandise beautifully displayed. I thought our stores were much nicer than New York. I love to go to Pogues and Shelito's, Mabley's, and Depke's, Romans and McAlpin's. We just had, really, we had everything. And I remember we would leave home about 9, and we would get into town around 9:45, and we would have to go to the Purple Cow. It was next door to the Albee on Vine Street.
And seeing everything about downtown, which when I was young was really bustling. Just lots and lots of people, lots of music, lots of Salvation Army people. You know, those kinds of things are just precious memories. And the special occasions when we went to the Colony and had the wonderful Colony lunch, the Colony Club salad. I never was able to imitate that.
But Shelito's always had a great animation window, and they had a floor all decorated just for Christmas. And they did the lights on the outside, too. They always had the lights on the outside. That's held a special thing because my uncle's company was in charge of putting the lights on and stringing those up. And on Thanksgiving, we always had Thanksgiving late because that was my dad. He had to oversee the whole thing. So he didn't get home until they got it trimmed. So Thanksgiving dinner was always late because he was down there getting ready for Christmas.
Going shopping downtown was no casual affair. No, indeed. It was always something of a to-do.
I used to come down every Saturday and wear my hat and gloves like every other lady did on the streetcar. And you'd go to a movie once in a while you were down there, and they'd always ask you to take your hat off, whoever was sitting behind you, because they couldn't see. But and I remember going to the Albee when I would be in town, Capitol, the Schubers. I saw George and Gracie Allen when they danced and did their jokes. I remember that very well at the Albee.
You see, I told you, it was exciting. Women dressed up just to go downtown shopping. Hats and gloves. I wonder who inspired that, Virginia.
Ruth Lyons always wore gloves, and everybody wore gloves. You wouldn't be caught dead without a hat and gloves. It was good. Everything was good about it.
Yes, Virginia, it was good. Whatever the reality of the time, our memory of it is a period of innocence and trust. In a great big world, that was a good thing for a small child.
Mother used to put me on a bus, and I'd go down to what used to be the fair store. And I would go in, and I thought I was big stuff. You know, I was 10 years old. I was doing this by myself, all by myself. Little did I know she had already talked to the sales lady and had everything all planned what I was going to buy and everything. But I thought I was going to be, you know, big stuff doing it.
Some of it might have been just being a child or a younger person that made it more exciting. And of course it was newer, but we thought it was such a thrill to get on the streetcar, go downtown, and of course that in itself was a big item. And then to more or less hit all the stores in town. We did an awful lot of window shopping, and we just enjoyed seeing the sights of downtown because that was where the action was.
The year I graduated high school, I got a job at Procter & Gamble. Out of our graduating class, there were 4 girls sent to P&G, and I was one of them. Well, we were very young and full of life, and we would pack a lunch periodically. Now, P&G at that time, even then, had a wonderful cafeteria. We would pack a brown bag lunch and go to Fountain Square and feed the pigeons, although there was a big sign that says, please do not feed the pigeons, the scraps from our sandwiches or whatever. Those kinds of days downtown were wonderful.
From the clickety-clack of the streetcar to the ride on Daddy's shoulders to see the sights in the Christmas windows, those were the seasons of our lives. So good to share again in stories and pictures. I can still smell the caramel apples from the Fountain Drugs. And I think I can smell the peanuts. Remember those mixed nut shops they had there? And how about the orange juice shops? Remember that? And the bakeries, they'd open the door, and this wonderful smell, the hot cross buns, come wafting out. I think I can smell it. I think I can. Perhaps in some of the Cincinnati memories we've shared on this program, you've seen snapshots of your own life, a life lived in a very special time. What a joy it is to remember. Looking back allows us to see who we were then, so that we might understand why we are who we are today. The past is, after all, just a point on a continuum, and tomorrow will be history, just one day. So no matter who you are or when you were born, if you live in Greater Cincinnati today, you are now a part of these Cincinnati Reflections. I'm Nick Clooney. Thanks for sharing the memories.
Thanks for